Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do on the Kid Lit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature, picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels too. Whether you're an adult reading to your inner child or connecting the young readers in your lives with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. Each week, we'll talk to a different children's literature author and discuss their books, their hopes and dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. So, grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of Kid Lit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Kid Lit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie, your host, here with an introduction to today's special guest. Why is it a special guest? Because we're doing something different today. Rather than talk to a single children's literature author about a single book, we're talking to a bookish person who's here to share several books with us to kick off middle grade March. We're talking to Afoma Umesi. Afoma embodies all things middle grade reading. And in fact, her wildly successful website is titled Reading Middle Grade. I've been a fan of hers for years. I treasure her book lists, her weekly emails, and especially the updates into her kid lit reading life. So today, we're going to talk about middle grade March. And if you're listening in real time on the day this episode is released, it's March 1st, day one of middle grade March. And we're going to share a variety of favorite titles so that you can add them to your TBR stack this month too. Afoma, welcome to the Kid Lit Love podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was a cool introduction. Now I feel very special. Thank
Good.
you. Happy
That's
to be here.
exactly what I hoped for. As I told you before we recorded, I've been following you for years, ever since you were first on Anne Vogel's What Should I Read Next podcast. I was so
Yes.
excited to listen to someone on that podcast who read children's literature as much as I did. And I instantly found you online. I followed your site. I followed you kind of off and on of Instagram, and have really
Yeah.
enjoyed seeing your website just grow and grow and grow and evolve over time. You really are the person I think of when I think of anything related to middle grade reading.
Oh, yay.
But
That's
for
good.
listeners who might not know you yet, can you give us a little background into who you are and how reading middle grade came to be?
Yes. So my name is Afoma Umesi. I am a Nigerian. I'm living in Nigeria right now with my husband. I consider myself a reader and a writer. I've been blogging since I was about 16 about different things here and there. So I had this like little personal blog where I wrote really bad poetry. And then eventually I did some lifestyle blogging, some fashion blogging, just kind of really trying to find a niche, as they say, like somewhere where I felt comfortable and where I felt like I could put out content every day, all day, every day. Um, Something that felt really natural. And I struggled for a while to find that. I should also mention that I went to med school. So like writing and blogging were always like an outlet for me. I always thought I was going to practice medicine and all of that. But then it turned out that writing became my job. So I think in 2019, I stumbled into Kidlit. I went back to the Babysitters Club books. I'd been reading a lot of literary fiction at the time, and everything felt really heavy, really stressful to read. And sometimes like it would take so long to finish a book. And I think I get a dopamine hit from just like finishing, knowing that I've read from start to finish. And like everything took so long, everything was so heavy. Sometimes like it felt so heavy that I wouldn't even want to be reading it. So when I found out, when I one day I just thought about like the Babysitters Club because it was a very memorable series when I was growing up. I read one of the books, as you already know, if you listen to the Modern Mrs. Darcy's podcast, I read all the books and I fell in love with it, and I never got to like finish the series. So as an adult, I was like, oh, I should check on this series and see if I could maybe enjoy it as an adult still. And I read Chrissy's Great Idea, I think it's called, the first one, and I just fell in love. It was so nostalgic. It was so hopeful. It was just fun. It felt really warm and enjoyable. It just took me back to like childhood in a really pleasant way. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna read something else. And then I got into Goodreads, and all the recommendations of different things I could try started coming up. And then I slowly found myself like discovering this like group of librarians and teachers reading middle grade. And then that was how I started. And then I started recommending books on my blog, which at the time was like a mishmash of like books, but also my life. And then eventually the books took over everything. So I was doing just reviews and book lists, and that was it. And I think it was called afomaumesi.com. And then I think in 2019, I rebranded and I became reading middle grade. And then that was it. Yeah, it just took off after that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so that is the story.
Yeah, and I love that story because it really embodies what I believe here on this podcast. In my
Mm,
opening clip, I say that this is a podcast for adults who are reading to their inner child and adults who are trying to
yes.
find literature for the young people in their lives. So I can completely relate to that.
Yeah,
I can definitely relate to the dopamine hit. I love the dopamine hit when you finish that last
I
page.
do. I really do. Yeah, it's like yes.
It is. And that comfort, that feeling when you read middle grade and you read children's literature is very different than when you read adult literature. And I wish more adults would give
Totally.
themselves
Yes.
permission to do that more often. Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm so
I
glad
agree.
your work.
I agree. I wish
Um,
the same too.
yeah. Well, and not only are
Oh
you
yes, I was saying I wish the same too.
you're not just wishing it though. You're doing it. You have so many beautiful book lists and recommendations on your site that there is something for every reader, child or adult, every educator, every librarian. I'm not quite sure how you put out as much content as you do. I'm always in awe. Like
Oh, I think it's the overachiever in me.
well, it sounds like it after listening to your story.
I think it's the overachiever in me. I'm always telling, and I always feel like I haven't put out enough content. Um, but this year I'm actually making an effort to like kind of slow down and not do too much. So let's see how that goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do read a lot, and I find that I am most creative content wise when I'm reading, because then like reading channels into that like development of ideas. I think about new themes. I think about new books I could recommend for new age ranges and new grades and things like that. So reading more really inspires me to create more content, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. So many books, so little time, right? We've got to get to them all.
Yes, the perennial problem.
So, starting today, if people are listening in real time, we are kicking off middle grade March, which hopefully will encourage
Yes.
people to read into middle grade, whether they're an adult or a child. And you're here to
Yes.
recommend some middle grade books for us to give a try and add to our staff.
Yes.
I'm really curious because you read a lot. You have hundreds, thousands of books listed on your
I
website.
know.
And so I'm wondering, how did you make the choice today of the books that you were going to
Uh,
recommend? How did they make the cut?
with much pain. It's always so hard when people are like, "Oh, I want you to recommend some books for our show or for our website." Because I'm like, where do I begin? Like, if you give me criteria, maybe it's easier. But I think I didn't. put pressure on myself to recommend like my best ever, because
Yeah.
at this point I don't think such a list exists. It's not even like humanly possible. So it's more like the best that come to mind. And because I'm reading right now a lot from my summer reading guide, I'm reading a lot of 2024 releases. So that's what's like on my plate. But also some books from maybe last year are still on my mind. So I have those. And I tried to really recommend things that are like fast paced, things that will appeal to a wide range of readers, because there's a lot of fantastic middle grade, but not everything is for every kind of reader. Some books are very quirky. But for me, generally, what appeals to me is like a great propulsive plot. So like a relatable premise, something that maybe I've never heard of before, something that I feel like kids are going to be dealing with in their own real lives. So those kinds of things really call out to me in the synopsis of the story. And I like wish fulfillment stories as well. As a kid, like it was great, the kind of like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory story where a kid is getting to do something you've always dreamed of doing. Those kinds of stories always appeal to me. I'm also looking for good characters. So
Mm.
stories where as soon as I open the page, the first page, I can like see the character come to life. Like I can hear their voice like really clearly. So that's really important to me with books as well. And I'm finding that for kids, we need stories that pick up really quickly. Like it's fine if it's not like the fastest paced story, but I think you need to hook the young reader very early on. Otherwise, it just gets really, they don't have the patience of an adult to struggle on. So, like, if by the end of the first chapter, the author hasn't given me a reason to stay on, and then I'm out. Like, I usually will do up to like 25 pages. And if I'm not feeling compelled, if it's making me slow down in my reading, then I'm not going to continue, because it's like you have nowhere to take me. So that's something that really calls out to me as well. And these days I've been enjoying humor. It doesn't have to be like silly slapstick humor. It's like really funny characters, funny things happening, awkward situations. It really, really gets me, and it keeps me going in a story. And something that I think maybe is unique to me is I like vivid settings. So like when a book is set in summer and it's all about summery things, the kids are going to the beach, they're going to the pool. I like that kind of thing. Or it's like a small town motel, and it's just like really steeped into the setting of the book and it takes you there. I love stories like that. Like you could be telling me about something I don't care about, but if the setting is really strong, I'll be like persuaded to continue. So all the books I'm recommending today have a little bit of these things that I've mentioned. Hopefully people will try them and like them. I think all of them are out except one, which is coming out in March. One will be out on the 5th of March. So you should be able to access all of them soon.
That's perfect. All of those kind of criteria that you have for selecting books are things that I also love. So I'm really excited to dive into that. And
Yay.
I,
Okay.
I'm ready. What do you got for us first?
First up is I think this is the most recent one I've read. It's called The First State of Being. It's by Erin Entrada Kelly. So this one is coming out March 5th, 2024, and it's by the Erin Entrada Kelly. It's her latest book. It's kind of it's sci-fi, time travel. It's about this boy who's living in Delaware in 1999, who is his name is Michael. He's terrified about the Y2K, so the fact that the dates are changing from the 90s or the 1800s and whatever, becoming the 2000s. It's like a new development. Everybody's worried that everything's going to crash. And so Michael is worried. He's kind of like doomsday prepping so that him and his single mom can survive the entry of Y2K. And then he's also like crushing on his 15-year-old babysitter, which is really adorable. And in the midst of all the chaos, he sees this weird boy who's like dressed funny, this weird teenage boy. And then after much investigation and interrogation by Michael and his babysitter, they find out that this boy is from the future, the year 2199. So this is like far off in the future, and they get to like compare ideas about what the world is like then, as much as the boy Ridge is going to tell them. And then Michael learns a lot from Ridge about worrying less, living more in the present. And Ridge, of course, learns from Michael as well. It's really well done. It's like almost cinematic, but at the same time, it's such a character deep dive. You're going to fall in love with Ridge, Gibby, and Michael throughout the story. And there's excerpts. We get like little sneak peeks into Ridge's life in the future and Michael's life as well. And everything just really flows wonderfully. Erin and Trada is just gifted. And I can't wait for more people to read that book. I love that it's got characters of different ages, and yet it's still very middle grade appropriate, like upper middle grade, even young YA, but there's nothing like inappropriate. So it's like going to appeal to a wide range of ages. And with the time travel element, it's really good.
Yeah, that does sound good. And like you, I adore this author.
Yeah,
So I just know I'm going to love it before I even know the plot.
it's fantastic. Yeah. I was
Great.
nervous about it because I'm not a big sci-fi person, but it really, really, it blew me away. It's really good. Yeah.
Excellent. What's
Yes.
next?
And then the next one is Ready, Set, Go. I've been talking about this book since last year. It's one of those books that I like because it's kind of mundane. I feel like Black kids, especially Black children, actually, the stories for Black children are very message heavy. It's about race, it's about police brutality. All of these things are important, but I think Black kids also want to read about just being kids.
Right.
I think they deserve to read sci-fi. They deserve a book that's not about being Black or their race or their culture or whatever, or how other people see them. That's just about them being kids. And that's what I love about this book. It's about sixth grader Zoe, very ambitious, always wants to win. And she's determined to get this new laptop so that she can do all her writing assignments. Her parents don't care about her whole laptop desire and everything. So when she sees the chance to win the laptop by selling the most number of cookie dough containers, she's all in, and she doesn't care who's going to be in her way, not her best friend, not her relationship with her family. She's ready to do whatever it takes. So as a fellow overachiever, I really resonated hard with her, and seeing her finally find a way to balance her ambition with other things that matter in life. It's really funny too. Zoe's funny. The people in her life are really funny. And I just loved getting that experience. It took me back to being that age and having like a frenemy in class and being really competitive. And I think that kids are going to enjoy this. And it's very short too, which is something that more kids have been looking for, short books.
Yeah. I think all of us on some level, especially me as a parent right now, we can all relate to selling cookie dough and that feeling of I have to get to this many in order to get this thing. And it's a
Yep.
thing. It's who races to their
Yep.
neighbors first to get the first dibs and all of that. So I imagine it will be
Oh,
very
yeah.
familiar to a lot of readers, which is
I think
wonderful.
so too. Yes. Yeah. I think it's going to be great. Yeah. I really loved it. And then another one I really liked that surprised me is Duel. It's by Jessica Badgley. I don't know if it's Badgley or Bagley. This is like the curse of a reader. You never know how things are pronounced, but
Yeah.
yes, it's Duel. It's a graphic novel about two sisters. There's a younger one and an older one. I think the younger one is getting to the sixth grade, and the older one is in the eighth grade. And she's kind of like Queen Bee. The older one, she has friends. She's like in the school's fencing team. So her little sister has just come into her middle school, and the girls have just lost their dad as well. So their mom is like grieving, and both of them are, there's a lot of animosity. They're not really speaking to each other as well. They don't have a very good relationship. So the younger one challenges the older one to a duel. She's like, I'm sick of all this. I'm sick of all the drama you're giving me. I don't know why you don't like me, but let's have a duel. And funny enough, she's not very good at fencing. The older one is. But both of them, the author kind of takes us back and forth. So we see how their relationship disintegrates over the years, and what role their dad has played in this, and how the grief that they're feeling for him is affecting their relationship. And then it leads up to this big duel. People in school are like rooting for different sisters, and it's all just like wildly entertaining but also deeply emotional. And I was amazed at how much emotion she was able to pack into a graphic novel. It just has so much plot and so much depth. I find that with graphic novels, sometimes you get like slice of life most of the time, not so much of a plot, just like, oh, this is what's happening in this person's life. But this story had like a plot, which I really appreciated. And fencing is an underrepresented sport in middle grade books, so it's always fun to have that. And again, it's a book about Black kids being kids, which I really loved as well.
Yeah, one of the things that I love in my adult reading life is to read books that have that multiple perspective format. So maybe a chapter alternates back and forth, or there's just something in the
Yes.
format. But that's something that you don't see as much in middle grade, right? For obvious reasons,
Yeah.
more complex. It's
Yeah.
you juggle more things in your head, but how wonderful
Yeah.
to have a book that
Yes.
brings that element to that. I'm excited to
Exactly.
look at that one.
Yeah, and with pictures too, so it's great. I think
Yeah.
kids are really big on graphic novels these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also love when a
Yeah.
book sends me to Google. So I could see myself Googling fencing and figuring out, a little bit more what sport I don't
Exactly.
know.
And every chapter starts with like a fencing tidbit, which is really nice.
Oh,
So you're
oh,
gonna
I
learn a lot
love
about
it. I
fencing.
love
Yeah, it's very
format.
cool.
Great.
Very cool. Very, very smart, really clever. Yeah. Yes. And then the fourth one, and I'm gonna do a total of 5 books. So this is like the second to the last one. So the fourth one is called Connected Dots. I just found out about this book. Well, no, I'd seen it on like my audiobook apps, but I was like, oh, this cover is so drab. Like, what could this book be about? And it's one of those books that even when you read like the blurb, it just doesn't have enough information. So I'm just like, what is this book about? Like, but then I was bored one day and I sat and I just like listened to the audiobook and it was fantastic. It's like, I can't even tell you, I don't even know how to book talk it, but basically it's a mystery. It's about 3 kids. I think one is called Frankie. Well, 3 kids, 2 boys, Frankie and Oliver. One of them's name is Frank or something. So 2 boys, besties. They're kind of like, lower on the social ladder in middle school, always avoiding the school bully. And then this girl, a new girl, comes to their school. She's called Matilda. And then all of a sudden, weird things start happening. So, first of all, somehow one of the boys buys this chutney in their neighborhood and the school bully takes it and he has an allergic reaction, and then they notice that a black car is following one of the boys, and then they start investigating this whole scheme that has to do with this scientist who knows chaos theory and is good at creating a random sequence of events. But basically it has to do with like history, friendship, loneliness, and how people kind of take advantage of other people, especially when you're like a genius. But the mystery comes together beautifully, and like that's the most I can say about it. You just have to try it, and I hope that you enjoy it. But it's really fun, and I'm always looking for books where like boys are the protagonists because I feel like sometimes that can be rare. And sometimes it's hard to like recommend people. Parents ask me all the time, oh, I want a book with a male protagonist. My son is having trouble finding a book to read. I think this is a good one for like boys in grades like 5 to 8 and even older. It's really enjoyable. There's a lot of like science, but even if you don't care about science, like I still couldn't explain to you what chaos theory is about, but I enjoyed the story. I thought it was still really fun and it's funny. There's a lot of humor. I laughed out loud like several times reading this one. So I'm really excited. I hope more people discover it. I think it's one of those pandemic books. It was released in 2020. So it must have flown under the radar a bit. But I'm hoping that more people can discover it because it was really good.
Well, and it sounds like it's also teaching us a lesson, perhaps not to judge a book by its cover and to give it a
Oh,
shot.
yeah. Oh yeah, I was genuinely like, I was like, wow, I've been missing out on this. I've been seeing this for like months and I've never read it because like I was not into the cover. So yeah, that's definitely a lesson for me. Now I'm like, okay, I'll try anything. I'll just listen, even if it's like the first 2 chapters. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
So that was a good lesson for me.
Do you
And
tend to
then the
listen to more
last,
books?
sorry,
Do you tend to listen
do
to
I
more books? Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely, especially like last year, it was like probably like 60 or 70% of all the books I read were like on audio. And it works for me with certain kinds of books. some books are slower, and I find that if I'm reading physically, like if I'm reading the hard copy or the digital edition, I'm just not so patient because I have so many books to get to. But if I'm like doing a chore, I'm doing the dishes, I'm tidying up, I have more patience. I can kind of tune in and out until it gets interesting. But if I'm reading, then I can't escape it. I have to like slog through every like
Yeah.
page to get to the good parts, and I just don't have the patience. So audiobooks are great with that. They take me through like the slower parts faster. I can do something else. I can like tune out, tune back in. So that's why audiobooks are really good. And then some narrators are really, really, really good at their jobs. So even when a book is not like excellent. Even if I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much if I read it on audio, it's like, oh, this is not bad. This is like this, yeah, it elevates the experience of the book for me.
Yeah.
So I love audiobooks.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that because I am someone who struggles to listen to books on audio.
Oh,
My attention wavers, I multitask, and then I multitask too much and I don't think
yeah,
about the book. But I really love your angle of how it can help you get through some of those books that maybe have a slow build a little bit faster. You don't abandon them, you just kind of stay with
yeah,
them. And literally, you could
yeah.
actually speed up the narration to help with
Exactly,
that as well.
exactly. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, but I read somewhere that or I heard somewhere that audiobook, like listening to audiobooks is a skill. You have to like build that skill over time. I think in the beginning it's very weird. It's like, why am I listening to somebody? It's like almost like that part that the processing part of your brain is hasn't been used in that way. So like you need to like kind of train it to like process it because you're used to like taking in the story with your eyes and now you're like doing it with your ears. So it takes some time. And I think maybe certain kinds of books might be stressful, like if there's a lot of detail, if it's a very complicated plot. For me, I don't like to listen to verse novels because the cadence just doesn't work for me. I like to experience it like
Yeah.
with my eyes. So over time, you'll find what you like to listen to. It might be nonfiction because it feels more like a podcast than like a story, or it might be like a funny book or a shorter book. So I think just keep experimenting and um, find other things you can do while listening that are not too like demanding. So like if you're going to work on your computer, it has to be something really monotonous. Like for me, if I'm like editing, like formatting documents, like adding links, things that don't require too much reading, then I can do it. But if I start reading and listening, then my brain is just like, oh my God, what's happening?
Yeah.
So
Which
yeah,
is
it's a tricky balance.
Yeah, that is what
Yeah.
happens to me. The only time I've been successful at listening to an audiobook and loving it was a really long car ride where there was nothing else to do. And it
Right.
was one of my favorite all-time middle grade books is Lucky Broken Girl by Ruth Baer. And
Oh,
she narrated it. So it was just such an experience to
oh
hear
wow.
narrate the
Yeah.
story that was based on her life. And so that does help me get into
Yeah.
the audiobooks a bit more, but I think I do need to save them for when it's just me listening because I am so
Yeah.
unfamiliar. I do need to get in the groove. So
Yeah. 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 I think that would be good for you. Yeah, you have one opportunity. What about walks? Do you do like walks?
I do. That's another good thing I could try. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah, like on walks it's nice because I love like even when I'm not like enjoying the audiobook and I start walking, I'm like, wow, this is so nice. It's just like somebody's keeping you company.
Yes.
Because walking is just walking. But then when you have something in your ears, it's like so much more fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I'm going to try that next.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. What is book
Yes.
number 5?
My last one just came out. It's called The Liar Society by Alison Gerba. So this is another dual narrator situation. It's two narrators. There's Jack and there's Weatherby. So Weatherby is this girl who's gotten a scholarship to a private school in Boston, and she's got like a sailing scholarship. So she her sport of choice is sailing. So she goes in there, but her presence there kind of like shakes things up because this other boy, Jack, is kind of like top of the sailing team. But now this new girl is in, and she's from a poor family. Jack is from a rich family. His family has been in this private school for years and years and years. But then all of a sudden, Jack and Weatherby and a couple of the other kids in the school, they get this message. There's rumors of a famed secret society in the school. So they're thinking that this person is like inviting them to the secret society, but then another secret starts to come out and they get to go away to this private island and they discover a big secret that involves Weatherby and involves Jack as well. So it's very intriguing. It was very, very, very mysterious. And I think it's one of those books that really feels like if your middle schooler has been wanting to read YA, like YA mysteries and thrillers, they're going to enjoy this one because it has that feel, but it's still innocent. There's nothing too gritty about it, but the story is very mysterious. It feels very high stakes. It's like big families in power and other things going on. So I'm really excited about the reception for that book. It reminds me of when City Spies first came out. I think that this feels also pivotal in the same way because I don't think there are many series like this for middle schoolers. So I'm very excited to see kids enjoy this one.
Well, you have given us such a nice balance. We've got some with a little mystery and intrigue. We have some with more, maybe I'd say typical fiction. There's a graphic novel thrown in there. You really have given us a little bit of everything so that every listener could pick up a middle grade book this
Yeah,
month
I hope so.
that might be right for
The only
them.
thing I'm missing is the only thing I'm missing is historical fiction. But now that I hear you talk about Ruth Behar, she has a new one out, which is the first book I read from her. It's called Across So Many Seas. It's about four generations of Sephardic Jewish girls and their journeys migrating through different countries and up until the present day. So for me, it was really fascinating history about like Jews in the Spanish regions of the world, Jews, and I think there was a girl in Spain, in Cuba, in Turkey as well. Very fascinating history. And apparently this is also the author's history. The audiobook also seems really good because there's like multiple narrators as well. So that's a good one to check out if you're looking for historical fiction to really sink your teeth into. It has a very mature edge. There's like really mature themes explored, like child marriage, things like that. So I think even for adults, it's going to be very appealing.
So 6 very interesting
Yeah,
books instead of 5, which is
I'll
good.
stop there.
No, it's very good. And this is what I love about books in general is that there are so many of them for us to choose from. But
Yep.
two people right now talking about middle grade literature, I read a lot. I'm a children's literature professor. I have this podcast. I read as much as I can, yet I have not read any of these 5 books that you're
Amazing. That's wonderful.
recommending. Yeah, so that's so exciting. There truly are
Yeah,
so many books that we
so
could get
many.
our hands on. And
Yeah.
just love that I can go add all 5 of these for my own great
Yay.
reading. Yeah. And
I'm
you
very
didn't
excited
plan
about
that in
that.
advance. We didn't talk about what those
No,
titles were.
no. Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah.
That's very nice.
So you
It's cool
mentioned,
because even when I, oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
No,
Even
it's Zoom.
even when I do school visits, like the kids always recommend books to me that I haven't read. And I'm like, I'm the expert and like I don't know, I've not read this book. I've heard about it, but I haven't read it. And they're like, have you read this book? Have you read? And I'm like, oh no, I haven't read this one. So it's very cool. There's so many books in the world. Got options.
Yeah. So tell me about the school visits for people listening that might be educators or librarians or principals. How can they take advantage of that?
Awesome. So this is something I started doing last year. I didn't even think it was possible, but somebody like an educator in South Korea reached out to me and she was like, I would love for you to come visit my students. They use your website all the time. We choose books from your site, so they would love to meet you. And I was so scared. I was like, I don't have anything to say. What am I going to say? I'm not an author. I don't publish books. I don't know anything. My husband was like, you have to try it. So I did and it was so much fun. So the first time I did a presentation about my reading life, talk to them about like how to find books they like, what book bloggers do, how it works. And it was like fascinating. They read so many books. Like they had a whole list of books that they'd read. And we did an activity together about their own reading lives, which was really fun. And then it gave me a little more courage. So I put it on my website and I started offering school visits. So I've done a couple more this year. I visited a school in Maine, and that was really fun because they were not, some of the kids were not big readers, but we talked about how to build a story. We talked about how to build, good characters. And then we did some really fun activities, writing activities. And the teachers were like, we haven't seen these kids interested in writing like ever. And
Yeah.
they all had like so many stories to tell. It was so amazing. And everybody was like, oh, I get story ideas all the time. And I was like, wow, aren't y'all a lucky bunch? Look at that. The writers would be so jealous of you because you get ideas all the time. So it was really fun. So I love doing these visits. I have like a link on my website where you can visit and get more information, or you can just email schoolvisits@readingmiddlegrade.com and I will provide more information. So generally, I could do like 30-minute presentation, a little bit of a Q&A, and then we have like an activity. I always like to do an activity because kids don't want to listen to you for 1 hour. They want to do stuff as well.
Right.
So it's always fun to do stuff with them. Yeah.
I love that. And I love that you listened to your husband and did it anyway,
Oh, yeah.
because you have a lot to share, and your wealth of knowledge on children's literature, the sheer amount of books that you could read and potentially could connect readers to is magic
Yeah.
when it happens. So I'm so glad you did it anyway and now realize the power
Yeah.
of doing that work.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. It's good.
great.
Yeah.
I'll put the link in the show notes so that if
Thank
they're
you.
listening, they could just get to you directly.
Sure.
Um,
Thank
you
you.
you also talked about your summer reading guide, which I've taken advantage of
Yes.
in the past. So tell us more about that.
So the summer reading guide is something I did actually inspired by Anne Bogle, which I knew that she was one of the first people to do it, and I always loved her summer reading guides. So I was like, why don't I do this but for kids? And it's tempting to do something like and say, oh, it's for all the kids in your life, but I just know that I'm better with middle grade books. So like that is my comfort zone. That's what I know, and I will be better able to serve that range of kids, like ages 8 to 12, and their reading needs. So I focus on that. And I'm looking these days, I'm adding more books for like slightly younger, for the kids who may not be big readers yet, and slightly older for the upper middle schoolers who are looking for like more mature stories. So that's basically what I do. Every year, the summer reading guide has had, I think it's had like 25 to 30 books. Um, and then I split it into 5 categories. But this year is going to be different because it's no longer free. The whole thing is no longer going to be free. So I'm adding more books to it, which is scary because I'm like, will anybody get it? But I'm trying to like believe in myself a bit more. And it takes a lot of work. Last year, I read more than 80 books. And it's crazy because you read a book and you just like, this is not going to go on the guide. And sometimes I'm like, I just wasted my time reading this book. I just read all of these pages and it's not a good fit. So it takes so much time. And then there's so much time designing the guide. And then there's time like writing the copy because it needs to be short. I'm not going to write like 10 lines for people. It's going to be like 4 or 5 lines. So I have to condense all the information. I'm writing and editing and editing. It takes so much time. And so I'm like, okay, well, if this is important to people, they will buy it and they will share it with their network and it will be great. So lots of teachers have told me that they've used it, they print it out for their class. Lots of librarians do that as well.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this year's guide. This year I'm focusing a lot more on books coming out between May to July, August, but there are going to be a few books from the first quarter of the year as well. So many great books out this year. We're seeing a lot more middle grade romances. So I'm excited to build a whole category about that as well. And I'm reading more historical fiction this year. So I'm hoping to build a category about that as well. So very excited.
Yeah, that does sound exciting. And I can attest to the fact of how much time and effort it goes to share your reading life in a public way and to share as much as you're sharing. in a public way,
Yeah.
and you give so much for free on your website that
Yeah.
I think your fans, the people who know the work you do, just paying for that summer reading guide is something that's well spent and well deserved because your
Yeah.
curation is amazing. Your lists are
Oh, thank you.
always so good. And I share them
Thank
with
you.
my students too. My students are actually teachers learning to
Right.
become literacy
Wow.
teachers. And we always talk about
Amazing.
your lists and share them together.
Oh,
I'm glad you're believing in you. I'm glad you're
yes.
doing that. And
Yeah.
I also want you to plug a little bit because you have a Patreon to support your
Oh,
work too, to
yes.
keep it going. So please say something about that too.
Okay, so my Patreon is also another way of stepping out and believing in myself. So it's a way I can create more content really geared toward educators. So my website is for everybody, educators, librarians, parents, kids also visit my website. But I'm finding that there's a better way I can serve educators, like help them with tips about like how to teach their kids how to love reading, little tips like First Chapter Friday, things like doing read alouds, which books are good for read aloud. So providing really targeted help to educators is something that I'm doing on my Patreon. So we started with some educator interviews, talking to librarians, educators, and then I share more book lists with them. So like my seasonal guide, summer reading guide is going to be free for Patreon subscribers. The spring books preview that I just did, also free for them. I've also started recording a Patreon only podcast, which has been an adventure. So I'm really excited. I didn't know I was going to love the format so much, but now I'm like, I have so many ideas, topics I want to share about like running a blog, but also like how my reading life works, how I keep everything going, how I plan for the summer reading guide, things like that. And then of course like book recommendations. Because my blog is kind of geared toward like search engines and stuff like that, there's a lot of lists that I don't put on there because it feels like a waste of time. Who's going to find this? But now there's like more ideas of lists that I can create that don't have to be targeted towards search engines, that can really answer the questions that teachers have, like specific books they can use for teaching specific units like World War II, or if they want books to talk about the past and the present, things like that are things that I'm designing for my Patreon community. So I'm very excited about it. I'm always thinking about new ideas and things to add to it. And it's really nice to see the community growing slowly but surely.
Oh, wonderful. Well, as I said in the beginning, I've loved watching your site grow. I was there for the first one and then I saw it transition
Yeah.
to one. So it is exciting to see all the different ways you're just building a love of middle grade literature and sharing it with everyone.
Mhm.
It's inspirational.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So where can listeners and readers, where can they find you? What's the easiest way to connect with you online?
Right. So, of course, the place where I'm always at is readingmiddlegrade.com. That's my blog. So, all the other links are on there. But another place where you can find me is Instagram. I am at what Afoma reads, at what Afoma reads. So that's my Instagram handle. So you can find me there as well. And then on my site, you can also sign up to my newsletter. I have a Friday Kidlit newsletter that goes out every Friday. Typically, it's a roundup of blog content. I like to share what I'm reading, what's new on Patreon, and I like to do a giveaway when I can. So those are the places where I hang out the most. And of course, my Patreon, if you go to patreon.com/reading middle grade altogether, um, that's where you'll find us as well.
Well, and I highly recommend listeners at least hop onto your website and
Yes.
subscribe to that newsletter list because
Yes.
it's one of my favorites on Fridays to see what
Oh,
you've done all week on the blog. And I
yeah.
was a recent giveaway winner. So you get free books in the mail sometimes if you are a subscriber. And it's
It's very cool. Like I'm so happy about all the publishers that decide to collaborate with us. Candlewick has been collaborating with us for a really long time, which is
yeah,
great. They do
yeah,
so well.
I was excited.
Yeah. I was happy. I was like, oh wow. And the thing that she does that I love is that she always gives you like another free book. I'm like, wow, look at all these
Yes.
people getting an extra book.
Yes. And what
She'll
I
be like, "Oh, I'll
love,
just throw in the first book in the series for you."
yeah, that's what I love is the domino effect of talking to bookish people. So you gave away Janet Costa-Bates' Rica Baptista book, which I won,
Mm-hmm.
and Phoebe from
Yeah.
Candlewick sent me that, and the one
Yeah.
that is coming out in just a couple of weeks, which led to me actually interviewing her for the podcast.
Really?
So your giveaway
Amazing.
had a
Oh,
beautiful effect.
oh, that's wonderful. Oh, I have to listen to that when it comes out.
Yeah,
I
she's
gotta listen to it.
wonderful.
That's a really cool. Yeah. Oh, that's nice. That makes me very
Good.
happy.
I'm glad.
Yeah,
Well,
she's really sweet.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Oh,
for coming on
thank
today and
you.
sharing
Thank you
such
for having me.
wonderful books. I
This
hope
was
to keep
fun.
in touch. Yeah,
Yes, please.
and good luck with everything that you're doing. Not that you need it, because the
Thank
content
you.
you put out there for middle
Oh,
grade.
thank you.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
That's very kind. Yes, it's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, thank you for listening, everyone, and I'll see you inside of the next episode of Kidlit Love. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Kidlit Love podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a bookish friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of kid lit love. Thanks for listening.